Hello and welcome back to the Sex and Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erin, and thank you so much for joining me as we take a wild ride together through the realms of sex and healing. So I'm recording today from cold, blustery, extreme weather warning Melbourne. So I do apologize in advance for the noise. It's very noisy where I am. There is the sound of traffic. We have strong winds. There was a helicopter just before. There was a baby crying. There was someone thumping in this apartment block. So the sound quality might not be as clear as normal. And so I do just ask for your patience and understanding with that while I'm traveling. But today's sharing is going to be quite unscripted, a bit of a flow. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to be going with this share, but it feels completely and utterly necessary at the same time. So this episode is going to be all about when breakups go bad. So I haven't been completely honest with you guys about what's been going on in my life and in my relationship, and integrity for me is something that I unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, don't get a choice in. Honesty is not something I get a choice in. When I sit here and I record a podcast, I often think that I'm fumbling through it or it doesn't make much sense. But the reason why I listen to my own podcast back, and I love doing so, is because it's a completely different experience being the listener. And what I'm able to hear is that actually what is coming through me is really clear and is really concise. And I give a lot of that credit to spirit. What I believe is that I show up here in alignment with myself. And one of the gifts that my soul has in this lifetime is the gift of communication. And that when I'm in alignment, when my thoughts, my mind, my emotions, my emotional body, my physical body, when I'm acting from a place of alignment, then I open myself up to allow spirit to use me, and that I tap into this energy of my higher self, and it streams through this vessel and through this gift of communication and communicate something that feels, yes, from me and through me, and yet something that's connected to something bigger. So if I'm not being honest, if I'm not acting in integrity, it's making me want to cry, I don't access that gift. It forces me to always be honest and always act in integrity because I want that energy with me all the time. I want spirit to utilize me as a vessel. I want to be guided by spirit, which I am in incredible ways, and I keep my consciousness in that place as much as possible, operating from that higher perspective, acting from that higher perspective. And for me, that's where my power lays. It's if I disconnect from spirit, then I lose my power and I feel very ordinary, and I don't want to be ordinary. I want to be connected. I want to have this incredible source of energy propelling me forward, inspiring me, guiding me, gifting me with this knowledge that I share with you guys, gifting me with insights, and it's just an incredible gift that I have, and I feel very, very grateful to be the recipient of such a gift in this lifetime, and it forces me to be honest. So when I haven't been completely honest here in this podcast, I start to lose that energy and I start to lose the connection, and I don't want to share, and it doesn't feel enlivening and it doesn't feel inspiring. It feels burdensome, and that's because I've disconnected from spirit and I'm operating solely as a human, just relying on my own energy source, my own intelligence, my own ideas. So today's sharing requires me to be honest. In order to be in alignment, in order to access that kind of energy to be able to record a podcast, it is asking me to be honest. Some of the reasons why I haven't been honest is because I wanted to also protect the reputation of other people. That puts me in a very tricky situation where I both have to be completely honest about my personal experience and what I'm going through, and I also want to retain a sense of anonymity around others so that I can have that freedom to share. And I also think from my heart and my compassion and my empathy about not doing or saying something that's going to have a negative impact on another. But at the end of the day, I'm sharing my experience. I'm being honest with what I have been through and what I've experienced, and what can we do? If other people have contributed that is their responsibility. I don't share my truth with animosity or with an intention to hurt anyone else, but to simply honor my own alignment, which is one of great integrity and great truthfulness and great honor, I hope. That is something that drives me deeply, and that's where I want to be met by others as well. So another reason why I haven't been sharing is because it's been very dark for me. It's been very, very hard, and I do know, I know that there's an energetic transfer that happens in this communication, and many of you reached me and say that you can feel me and that you could feel the emotion, or you could feel, whether you get goosebumps or whatever it might be, that many of you are aware of that energetic component of this podcast. And it's important for me to share energy that I think is of great contribution. So if I was to share from a dark place, I'd be aware that I'm also transmitting that energy. And whilst I don't believe that that's bad or wrong, I do ask myself, who is that for? What is the intention here with this podcast? Why are you doing these things? So as much as I need to be truthful about my experiences and transparent and share the entire process of what I'm going through, I do genuinely feel that it's better to get to a good place in order to be able to share that with some greater or higher perspective, with some more insight and understanding, perhaps further along in my healing journey, rather than right in the midst of it. And also, I'm a massive fucking introvert. I'm a Cancerian. I'm a hermit. I'm a recluse. One of the many dualities that makes up who I am. So I can be here sharing all the guts and glory of my life. And I also need privacy. So while I was going through that, there was no inclination to share. But now I'm here with the inclination. So what can I tell you? My relationship breakup turned bad. And as much as I try and do my absolute best to communicate as clear as I can, to show up with integrity, to maintain my commitments, to navigate through things, to not take things personally, to own my triggers and not to project my stuff, our quality of relationship is only ever going to be as good as the lowest common denominator. So if someone is behaving badly, that is going to dictate the quality of the relationship. It doesn't matter how well I show up. It doesn't matter how committed I am to the agreements that we had in place. If someone else chooses to break all of that, there's nothing I can do. I did my very best to create the environment for the greatest success that we could have as a couple. But you can't actually ask for anyone for anything else other than their commitment to something and for their integrity. And if they choose not to have either of those things, then it sucks for both of us. I'm sure it sucks to be in that position where you're choosing to behave in a way that's so hurtful and so against who you've portrayed yourself to be and the statements that you've made. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to the line, you're not those things and you're not that person, and you don't have the capacity to fulfill the agreements that you made or even that you set. That can't feel nice. I'm sure that feels like fucking shit on one level, and whether you want to open yourself up to feel that or whether you want to shut your heart down and act from that place, it's got to be, both of those experiences have got to be unpleasant to exist in. So when I look back at our relationship and the problems in the relationship that actually got me to the point where I said I wanted to leave, was that his choices were causing me great pain. And I expressed that the cost of him making those choices is the destruction of our relationship and the degradation of the quality of the relationship that we had built. And he continued to choose that. And that is the behavior of an addict. If you are going to choose your gratification at the destruction and the expense of people that you claim to love, that's not healthy behavior. And I had problems with these choices that he made right from the beginning. And I now know why. Of course, I first internalized all of it and looked at it like it was my problem and my triggers, and I had to work through it. And I just got to the point where I felt like I was defeated. And I've never felt defeated. I've never felt like I was coming up against something inside of me that couldn't be healed. I certainly felt like that when I was younger, like I was absolutely convinced that no one could help me, that what I'd been through in my life had caused me so much damage that no one could help me. But I've devoted the last 5 years of my life to healing, and I've been blessed with the right people at the right time with the right skills who were capable of helping me heal and giving me the tools for me to continue to heal myself and heal others in the same way. And so now I feel victorious and capable and powerful and equipped. And so to come up against this sense of defeat over this seemingly small thing, it was really hard for me to admit. It was hard for me to get the words out of my mouth, like, I feel defeated by this. And what I realized at the end of the day was it wasn't that I was defeated, it was that I was fighting the wrong battle. That thing was never meant to be okay with me. I was never meant to be okay with him being an addict and the choices that he makes from that place. And of course, this is all my perception. It's my understanding from being an addict myself when I was younger, from knowing what it's like to have addictive behaviors and pain that you are hiding from through your addiction. The destruction is real. And if I had continued to internalize all of it and made it something that I needed to change in order for our relationship to thrive, then I'm doing a massive betrayal to myself. It's starting to rain outside, which is very nice. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, but cleansing rain. It wasn't that I was defeated, it was that I was out of alignment and I was trying to make something okay that isn't actually okay with me. And I'm an extremely energetic person, and I really mean it when I say extreme. So he and I met online and we had a long distance relationship for the majority of our relationship, in fact. And when we first started connecting, and he was on a different time zone, so he'd be awake when I was asleep, I would wake up in the morning and I could feel his presence, almost like he had been pacing around my bed like a wild cat stalking its prey. And that's actually something that's very erotic to me. But it was quite astounding how aware I was when I was coming out of a dream state that his energy was there and that he'd been thinking about me that day and he'd been thinking about me in that way. And then so many of our sexual experiences took place via Zoom. Some really crazy, profound sexual experiences that many people would understand to be astral sex, the intense energetic experience. And I could feel him inside of my body, and he could feel being inside of my body, and I could feel when he would ejaculate, and he could feel when, like, it's just crazy without getting into the intricacies of what we would do sexually on an energetic plane. We were there together. And if you're not used to that, I'm sure that can be a very intimidating thing or a scary thing. You know, I think a lot of people think that they're spiritual people having spiritual experiences, but to actually be, my concepts of spirituality are very, very different from the rest of the world because it's grounded in a very intense reality. So that exorcism podcast that I talked about was at a distance. And I remember him a couple of days after that kind of still spinning out a bit and saying that was really intense. That was really intense. Like, I think he saw firsthand how undeniable it is that something much greater is in charge of my life, and that this isn't just some concept of like, oh, I'm so spiritual and I'm going to run off to Bali and be a hippie and do these things and talk about these nice concepts. It's like, no, this is a very real fucking thing. And I don't always get a choice about it. So I could feel him right from the beginning, before we were even, well, as we were forming a relationship. We had an incredible energetic connection throughout the length of our long distance relationship. And now that we're starting to end, I can feel him again, especially now that we're at distance again and I'm in Melbourne. So this week, actually, let me backtrack a little bit before I get to that part of the story. My leg is completely dead where I'm sitting. I just had to move a little bit. So as you know, and as I'd shared, we were navigating a breakup because I reached a point where his choices were breaking our agreements, the commitments that he had made to me over the duration of nearly a year, the commitments that he made that took me deeper into my vulnerability, the offerings, the I don't know how to explain this well, but my submission is based, everyone's submission, I'm sure, is based on trust. And as you go deeper into that submission, you need deeper and deeper levels of trust. And I trusted his words. And I trusted the connection that we would share at a distance and how real that was. And when we were together, he was the complete opposite of that. His actions did not align with his words at all. And he had guided me very deep into my submission with those words. And then when it came time to put the actions behind that and show me his trustworthiness, it was the complete opposite. It was a blatant disregard for my needs and the commitments that we had shared together. There was deceit. There was abandonment. It's a pretty devastating thing to have. It's a scary and shocking thing to have, to be so deep in submission and to have feel dropped like that, to place yourself in the hands of another, energetically and emotionally, and even my mental well-being, to energetically tie yourself to someone so deeply and that person can't hold you and maybe never could. So when these things started to happen, I said, I cannot do this. I've worked as hard as I possibly can. I've done everything in my power and I can't make this relationship work. And so we spent my last couple of weeks before I came on a trip to Australia kind of navigating what we might be, how we could spend time together. Was there any potential? And when I got to Australia and in quarantine, he just did the same thing again. As soon as he wasn't in my presence, he continued with the choices and behaviors that are very destructive to me. And I couldn't stop crying. And I was in a very isolated place, as you can imagine. Quarantine is very, very hard. And I consider myself to be mentally strong and resilient. It was also the Scorpio full moon, which is a very intense astrological influence. I was due to get my period, which also makes me sensitive. And I wrote to him and said, you are just showing me that there is absolutely no chance for us to have a future together, and I'm devastated. And he just never replied. And he was the one at the beginning who set an agreement between us that no form of ghosting is ever okay. And so for him to leave me in that environment, in that kind of emotional pain, and to behave so poorly is something I never saw coming. And that just adds to the pain of it, that you're not in any way mentally or emotionally prepared to be treated like that. And I left it 24 hours waiting for a reply. and there was nothing. And the next night I had this overwhelming rage and anger come through me, and I felt Goddess Kali. And again, when I say these things, this is not a mystical concept. It's a very, very real experience that I have with the presence of these gods and these goddesses and these spiritual beings and teachers. And I felt the energy of Kali, and Kali uses sacred rage. She uses the appropriate expression of anger to restore righteousness. And I'm not an angry person, and I certainly don't like to act from rage, and I don't like to blame. That is not my way of relating or conflict resolution in any way, shape or form. And yet this rage inside of me needed to be expressed, and I needed to lay it out loud and clear and not give him an opportunity to hide. Because if I am sweet and loving and allowing and forgiving, and someone doesn't take an environment like that to continue to show up well, and if they take advantage of that and continue to choose destructive behaviors, then it's an injustice for me to behave like that. That my loving nature, my gentleness, my compassion isn't of the greatest good for our relationship. My belly just grumbled. I don't know if you heard that too. So I wrote this text message. I felt Kali take over my body, and I felt a sword in my hand that went straight through his heart. I knew that the words that I was saying were painful, and I couldn't not say them. Honestly, I could not say them. And I know that that is a guidance that wasn't coming from my own vengefulness. That was coming from my higher consciousness and something that needed to be experienced. So I then wrote a poem about Kali and the sword and feeling it slice through his heart. And I contacted my friend who teaches Hindu mythology, and I said, because I Googled, does Kali hold a sword? I thought it was called the sword of truth or the sword of knowledge. That's what it felt like to me as I was having this experience. And I Google it, and Kali does hold a sword, and she holds a sword that she uses to cut off the heads of men, and she wears their severed heads around her neck, and she does that to enlighten them from their ego, to liberate them from their ego. But I knew that I wasn't cutting off a head. I knew that that was going through a heart. So I contacted my friend, and she said, oh yes, babe, Kali uses that sword, and she was fighting a demon who every time that demon's blood touched the ground, another demon would burst from that drop of blood. So she ended up licking that blood off the ground and becoming bloodthirsty, and in a bloodthirsty rage sliced Shiva, her beloved, the divine masculine counterpart, through his heart with her sword. And when she looked down and realized that it was her beloved, she ended up fucking him back to life. So it astounds me that these are my experiences, that I don't know these things, and yet this presence is with me, guiding me in this way. So his response to that message was something along the lines of, let me know when you return and I'll organize your belongings to be returned. I'm speechless at that level of relating. I'm very saddened. I'm hurt. I'm just disappointed because, again, as I said, I never saw it coming. That's not who he had portrayed himself to be. That is not how he had demonstrated his relational intelligence up until then. So I basically demanded that we got on Zoom, and I said, I'm in quarantine. I'm in this position where I do not have any comfort, I do not have any control, I don't have anyone to be with me. Can we please end this properly and with honor and with grace? And that means listening to each other, wrapping things up neatly. So he did finally agree to get onto Zoom, and his heart was completely closed, and he gave me the bare minimum, and then said that he will sit with everything that I've communicated, and he will eventually write me a letter at some point during the 6 weeks that I'm traveling. So it's obviously been a very, very, very painful experience for me to navigate. I've been away from home. I've been trying to integrate into Australia, which comes with its own challenges and difficulty and struggles. And then this week I could feel his energy again. And so it started with him holding my shoulder. So when we're at a distance, I used to read our energy almost every day, read where our spirits were in relationship to each other. And the images that I would get would tell me where he's at, how he's feeling, where his focus is. And I could feel him again attaching to me in the way that he used to, but he had his back to me this time. And it was like he was angry, but kind of glancing over his shoulder at me a little bit like, is she still there? And I knew that he was battling within himself between his feelings of hurt and his victimhood and his narcissism, and somewhere inside of him some sense of love towards me. And so each day I could feel him getting closer and closer. And I was going to bed the other night and I could feel him so close to me, and I just wanted to scream. I just was overwhelmed with this feeling of like, if you're not going to fucking love me well, let me go. Don't hold on to me. Don't connect with me and continue to fail me. And I woke up 2 mornings ago and felt him the closest that he's been yet. And the hope in my heart was that he would come back to me and say, I'm going to work to be a better man. And that what we have is worth it, and you're worth it. I know how scary it is to date, to be in love with someone like me, where there is no hiding and there's no break from the intensity, and there's no way that you can lie, and you will get caught out and you will be fully seen in every choice, and that the expectations are that you show up with as much integrity as I show up with, and that you are as committed as I am committed to a relationship. Most people are not up for that kind of relationship. Most people love to fucking hide. They like relationships where you don't rock the boat, where you don't push each other's buttons, where you just coexist side by side and coordinate those relationships in a way that you don't have to be fully seen. And when I look at his pattern, he said to me at the beginning, I have a pattern of choosing strong women. And I would say that that's a complete lie, because he has a pattern of women that hide. Women that either hide the relationship that they have with him, they hide from the other relationships that he has with other women. There is this universal pattern of not being fully present with anyone. And that's just not the way that you can relate with Erin Kiner. I'm so sorry. It's just not who I am. It's not how I relate. It's not how I can exist in a relationship. And if you don't want that, if you're not capable of doing that, then yes, this is not the relationship for you. But I truly thought he had it in him, that he would fight for it. So I got a letter that day that I felt him very close to me. I didn't check my emails until the evening, but I woke up in the morning with that feeling and with the hope in my heart. And the letter that I received is not that. It took some responsibility, and so I'd like to give him credit for that. It had some apologies in there. We had talked many times about the language of apology. So there are the 5 love languages, which most people are familiar with, but there's also languages of apology, and that apologies land differently for different people. And he would often say, in the heat of a tense moment, I apologize. And that in itself drives me so fucking crazy, because to apologize is a verb. It's an action. But sorry is an adjective. It's to apologize is a feelingless statement. And the origins of the word come from the late 16th century, which mean to make a defensive argument. But sorry comes from Old English meaning pained or distressed. So for me to hear someone say I'm sorry holds the feeling of I'm pained by what I did. To apologize is a defense. Now these are just semantics, and it's not going to be the same for everyone. That the way that I place importance on the feeling state and knowing that that person feels remorse and feels the fullness of the experience is based in my life experience of being an incredibly sensitive person and growing up where people couldn't empathize with me, or I lived in an empathy-free environment where no one was feeling anything. So for someone to say I'm sorry in a meaningful way, the language of apology that I need is to say, I am sorry, that must have hurt you. To understand and to express the reason why they're saying sorry, so that they know that the hurt that I did, to just say, I apologize, as a defense, isn't valuable to me. So although I look in this letter and it says, I apologize, I apologize, I apologize, I take responsibility in that, is a great leap forward from where he was. And sadly for me, still devoid of feeling. It's not enough for me, but that's fine because he was choosing to end things anyway. So he didn't want to say, I'll fight for this, or this is worth it. He said that his listening wasn't as pure as he's now realizing that his listening is not pure, and that he never really heard my desires and my needs, and that he never was really in those places with me. Even though he touched it and he felt it, it was fleeting. And I can understand why that would be a very intimidating experience for someone that's not an energetic being or hasn't been met in those ways. But I know that we went to those places together. I know that in order for me to transform my life in the way that I have through this relationship, that it was real. And I don't want to doubt myself around that, even though that letter absolutely made me doubt everything, because he didn't acknowledge that he loved me. He said he was teaching and sharing while I was feeling deeply and loving. So to deny that he was loving, indirectly deny that he was there in that experience of love with me, is very hurtful. So this is where relationships go bad. Where hearts are broken, hearts become closed, agreements are broken, trust is shattered, hearts are shattered, and all I can do is open my own heart. And I'm surrounded by the most incredible women who open their hearts to me and support me in a way that love is undeniable. It is such a real thing. Love is, even a client said to me this week, sometimes I doubt, is love even real? And I know she's saying that because she's under a lot of stress and she's in survival mode in her marriage, and everyone's just in their heads and no one's living from their hearts. And you can feel the absence of love, which sometimes would make people doubt love. While in quarantine, I watched a documentary about some men in recovery from opioid addiction, and it was a 6-month live-in program, and they were basically being taught the fundamentals of relating. And one guy in there said, I don't know anyone who's sober. My stepdad got me into drugs when I was 12. All my friends are on drugs. My parents are on drugs. Like, no one in my neighborhood is sober. And you can imagine the pain that these people are in and the development of children who are raised in that. And then they're at this live-in experience and they're being taught how to be good friends to each other. One guy's crying about something that had happened to his children while they were in care. And the leader was saying, no, your friend's in pain. How are you going to show up for him? What are you going to do for him? I thought, yeah, they've never been demonstrated that. No one's ever shown them that. No one's shown them care. And as one of these men graduates, he said, I never believed in love. I thought it was just something that people would say to make you do things that they wanted you to do. And now I understand love. And that moved me so much because it's so real. As real as spirit is for me in a way that many people don't understand. Love is exactly the same. When you've been in the presence of immense love with someone whose heart is so open and so pure, it cannot be denied. And I'm so grateful to have other loving women in my world who keep their hearts open and show me care. And that just as soon as I hear their voice, I'm overwhelmed with receiving the love that they have for me and the love that we have for each other, and that it's effortless for us to love each other in that way and to support each other through these kind of hardships. And we see these opportunities as amazing opportunities for growth and for our spiritual development. And I do believe this relationship came into my life as a soul agreement, as a pre-agreed contract for this growth. That through this pain, through this betrayal, through this abandonment, I'm being gifted with an opportunity to become stronger, more loving, more worthy, to have higher standards and boundaries for myself, to be more aware of when I'm being manipulated, of when I'm being abused. I had so many fears in this relationship, and all of them came true. And I thought those fears were my fears, my subconscious preconditioning, my past life experiences. And now I see it was my intuition. They were premonitions. But I believe I was meant to go through it, not in a way to justify being treated poorly, but also to get the lessons that I had available to me through this relationship and to get out of this relationship. It's a fine line to say I'm guided here by spirit while being manipulated, while my mental and emotional well-being is being abused by lies, my vulnerability being abused by someone that feels like they're being an imposter. And I wonder how long he knew that. When did he know that he was not going to be able to fulfill his promises? And how long did he keep saying, yes, baby, you're safe. You're safe to trust. You're safe to fall in love. I will never abandon you. I know I will never abandon you. To know that you're dealing with someone who has a deep wound of abandonment and has had many abusive experiences in life that I'm recovering from, that I'm recovered from, and to play out the same story and do the same thing, that's abusive. If you can't take care of someone's heart, if you doubt your capacity to hold their heart and to hold their sensitivities, then it's vital that you're honest about that and that you don't invite someone deeper and deeper and deeper when there's that fear that you cannot fulfill it, or that knowing, or a fleeting touching that experience, though fleeting. So we pick ourselves up, we open our hearts, we continue to be loving, we continue to look for the gifts of this soul agreement. Why did my soul create this experience? What was I here to learn? How am I walking away a better person? What have I been gifted with? What do I know now that I didn't know before? How is this preparing me for the one that is my equal, that is my match, and can love me as well as I love? As I prepare to return to Bali in 2.5 weeks, I have a new home that I'm returning to, which I am so excited about. My best friend is coming back to Bali, which I cannot wait, because there has been a giant hole in my life while she's been gone. And I'm going to get cats again. So the last cats I had belonged to the villa that I lived in. So I had to say goodbye to them when I moved, and now that I'm going back into my own villa, it's time to get my own animals. So I have amazing things coming up with work. Amazing things coming up with work. Worship, we're preparing to launch again. So we're going to share the link for the waitlist. My team are incredible. I feel so blessed to be supported by women who share the same commitment to this path and to growth and to empowering the lives of others, that we can take these experiences in life and transform them into gold and use that, raise the consciousness of the planet, heal women everywhere, that we may all know our self-worth unconditionally, that we awaken our sexuality and receive all the pleasure that's available to us. So we are working hard behind the scenes, and especially while I'm here in Australia, and I can't wait to share with you what's coming from work. So thank you for listening. I know this has been another long episode. I am so grateful for you. The people who choose to follow me and listen and sign up, join the Pleasure Challenge, work with me as a client, just follow me on Instagram, whatever it is. I'm so lucky to have such incredible people. And I hope that you have the very real experience of feeling my love. Because love is a very real thing. So until next time, my beloveds, I love you. Laugh loud and fuck louder.